Okay, guys, we are on part 3 of Circle of Magic, Sandry's book. And we're about to be introduced to the character that you may realize after we listen to this that this is one of my favorite characters. This is probably going to be the longest portion of our first chapter, mainly because we get to hear all of his story in one go. So, let's go. In Hajra, port city of Sotat. The first time the Hajran street guard caught Roach with a hand on someone else's purse, they tattooed an X on the web of skin between his right thumb and forefinger, then tossed him back into a big holding cell overnight. Nursing his sore hand, Roach went straight to the far edge of the chamber, where a watery beam of sunshine reached down from an opening in the wall. Patches of cushiony moss grew there. Sitting on the floor, Roach found one of them that made a fine pillow. Months later, a shopkeeper grabbed Roach as the boy helped himself to a few scarves. The Hajran street guard took him, tattooed an X on the web of his left hand, and tossed him into the same holding cell. The moss had grown to cover most of a corner. It made a soft couch where he could sleep and wait to be released in the morning. Roach's current visit was his third. The guard had nabbed his entire gang of street rats in the jeweler's shop. Most of them already had 2 X tattoos, which meant they got no third release from justice. All of them were thrown into the grate's holding cell. His moss now covered the entire corner, and a good amount of floor as well. It was the most comfortable bed he'd ever had, with room left over for the rest of his gangmates to use it for a pillow. As others scrambled for a share of the slop the guard called supper, Roach whispered to his moss. "I won't be back," he explained. "Third time's cursed. I'll get the mines or galleys or shipyards. Unless I break out, it's for life." He smiled faintly. Life was a short thing now. No one lived more than 2 years in those places, and escapes were rare. For all that, he slept well. When he woke, it was judging day in Hajra. "Weevil!" brayed a guard at the door. Roach's gangmates sat up. "Dancer! Alley cat! Viper! Slug!" Roach hissed angrily. It was Slug that got them all in this fix, watching them steal instead of looking out for street guards. "Cheater! Turtle! Roach!" Roach hesitated. Should he make them come get him? A guard cracked a whip, looking at them. Roach decided to avoid the beating he'd get if the man had to drag him. With 2 X's on his hands, he'd receive plenty of beatings in the future as it was. "Thank you," he told the moss, and joined the rest of his gang. They were quick-marched past other cells, then up a long flight of stairs. On the level floors, the guard began to trot, urging the captives along with their whips. Roach was gasping when they were driven into a huge, echoing chamber. A woman in the gray robes of a magistrate sat behind a long table. People in street clothes stood in back of her. Clerks sat on each end of the table, scribbling as guards and civilians testified against criminals. Roach ignored the testimony that concerned his gang. These grand folks had already judged him, so why listen to their cackle? When the testimony was done, a clerk called out, "Weevil!" The gang leader was shoved in front of the judge. "Hands!" he ordered. The guards slammed Weevil's hands down on the table, holding them so the 2 X tattoos were visible. Like Roach, Weevil had 2 of them. "Mines!" the judge said. A guard shoved Weevil into a wooden holding pen at the rear of the chamber. Roach shut out the rest as the law officers worked their way through the gang. Instead, He thought of those plants in the cell, how peacefully green the moss showed when even a tiny bit of sun touched it. Give him a green like that from a living plant over the light that danced in emeralds. That was hard color. The moss glow was soft. The plant didn't even seem to need much earth to grow in, though it liked water. He'd given it part of his water ration when no one was looking. He didn't mind being good to growing things, but he did object when others made fun of him for doing it. Twin pairs of rough hands picked him up, then dropped him in front of the magistrate's table, jarring his ankles. He growled and fought as the guards dragged his hands out in front of him. He knew it was useless, but he didn't care. They'd remember him at least. The judge didn't look at his face, only his hands. "Docs," she said. "Ready, Odge." They were dragging Roach to a separate pen from the one that held Weevil and Viper when a light male voice said, "A moment." It was not a request, but a command. The guards looked back. Roach did not. "May I see the boy again?" the man inquired. "Bring him." The judge sounded bored. Roach was hauled back to stand in front of a civilian. This was no lawyer or soldier. His long, loose overrobe was a deep blue, dyed cloth that cost a silver penny the yard on Draper's Lane. It was worn open, over loose gray breeches, a pale gray shirt, and good boots. He carried only a dagger. It hung next to the purse on his belt. This was a money bag, then, or an officer. Somebody big for certain. Somebody who wore power like a cloak. The bag whispered to the judge, made a face. He held something before her eyes. A letter with a beribboned seal on it. The judge glared at Roach, but nodded, and the bag stepped away from her. "Their Majesties are inclined to offer you mercy, as you are but a youth." The judge rattled it off fast, a speech learned by heart. "You have a choice, the docks or exile from Sotat and service at the—" She faltered. The bag bent down to whisper. Long, gray, streaked black hair tumbled forward to hide his face. Roach wondered if he was looking for a cute little servant boy, and grinned. Men who liked play toys, always regretted meeting him. The man straightened and looked around until his dark eyes caught and held Roach's gray-green ones. There was something in that black gaze, something that had nothing to do with human play toys. Roach's sense of power, held in check, grew threefold when he met those eyes. They warmed and comforted at the same time. Roach looked down. "You have a choice of the docks or apprenticeship to the Winding Circle Temple in Emelon," the judge went on, "until you take formal vows at the temple, or its governing council rules that you are fit to enter society. Temple or docks, boy. Choose." Choose? There were guards on the docks. Nasty, wary fellows. What temple could hang on to a smart rat like him? Better yet, Emelon was far to the north of Sotat. Fresh territory where no one knew who he was. "Temple," he replied. "Make out transfer papers," the judge told a clerk. "Master Niclarin?" This was to the blue-robed man. "Will you take charge of him?" "Of course." For a moment, Roach's heart raced. He might be able to run before he ever saw Emelon. Then he met the bag's eyes and gave up that idea. The man, Master Niclarin, looked too wise to fall for any dodge he might pull. "I can't make out papers for a roach," whined the clerk. "Not to a temple." "This is a chance, lad." Niclarin's voice was light in tone for a man's. "You can pick a name, one that's yours alone. You can choose how you'll be seen from now on." "Only as long as I stay," Roach thought. Still, the bag was right. Roach had never liked his name, but no one argued with the title Thief Lord gave. "Choose, boy, and hurry up," snapped the judge. "I've other cases beside yours." The docks were too close to risk annoying these people. What name would temple folk like? Plant and animal names, that was it. He imagined robed men and women smiling at him and giving up the key to the temple gate. Plant and animal names. A picture flashed into his mind, a green velvet corner. But that wouldn't do. He needed a tough name, one that would tell folks he was not to be trifled with. He steadied his hands, trying to think, and noticed scarred welts across his right palm, a souvenir of a vine that grew on a merchant's garden wall. "What's them vines with needles on them? Big sharp one that rip chunks out when you grab 'em?" The bag smiled. "Roses. Briars." He liked the sound of that second one. "Briar, then." "You need a last name," the clerk said, rolling his eyes. "A last name?" wondered Brooch. "Whatever for?" The judge tapped the desk impatiently. "Moss," he said. No one would think he was moss soft if he just didn't use it. "Briar Moss," said the clerk, and filled in the blank space on his paper. "Master Nico, I'll need your signature." Briar frowned. Master was a word for professors, judges, and wizards. The temples called women and men dedicate. Who was this man, anyway? "Cut him loose." The bag, Master Niclarin, ordered the guards. "Your pardon, sir, but you don't know what he's like. He's born and bred to vice." Niclarin straightened and caught the man with one of those black, powerful eyes. "Are these remarks addressed to me?" Roach shivered. Was the room suddenly colder? The judge drew a circle of protection on the front of her robe. The guard's face went as white as milk. His partner cut Roach free. "Briar won't run, will you, lad?" Niclarin bent to sign the clerk's paper. Briar, Roach, sensed that the bag was right. Something about this man made escape seem like a bad idea. "I'll stick till we get to the temple place," he told himself. "I can get lost there, easy." And that is how we've met Briar. Can you see why I chose him as the name for my dog? We have one more main character to meet, and I will introduce you to her in just a second.